Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Subscribing to My Podcast. Because I have a new guest featured every week, it makes it very difficult to maintain consistent viewership. So if there's one thing that you can do to support me or the guest featured on the show, it's by interacting with my channel in every way that you can. You can always decide to unsubscribe later if you decide that you hate me or my show. With that plugging aside, enjoy my discussion with Evan Deal is a student here at Iowa State, and he reached out to me and he wanted to chat about some of his work in politics because he's currently working for the Iowa House of Representatives. He's been involved in Doge, some tax work, some other stuff, and really just absorbing a lot of the stuff that goes on at the Iowa Capitol. Evan and I have talked for a little while. We met up and chatted about some of the issues, and he really alerted me to some of the exciting stuff, some of the exciting stones that he's overturning, and the other things that he's seeing in his work and in his job right now. But Evan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell some of the viewers some important things that they should know about you.
That was quite the introduction. Thank you for having me, by the way. So what I really came here to talk about was a property tax issue here in the state of Iowa. I think if you go around to any local towns or rural areas, the number one thing on people's mind is property taxes. And so looking at it, there's a bunch of different places you can start, but one major program, I guess you could call it, is TIF. And TIF is tax increment financing, and it's kind of a setup where the counties can alleviate the pain of some of these businesses and then make the people of the county that pay property taxes, they have to pay for the businesses. It's a tax cut is what it is. It was designed in a fashion that was supposed to be beneficial, but it turned out that there was no oversight or nobody watching what was going on, and it's ran out of control, and it's making counties and the state kind of feel the pain and starting to go into more debt because of it.
Yeah, well, and I wonder, just on like a broader level, you're working in politics, you're a young guy, you know what I mean? And you're showing up and you're involved in these, you're doing your work. Can you, I guess, talk to me about a little bit of like where you started, what you do for your job, and then the ways you've interacted? I know that we had talked and you were excited because you were saying that some stones are being unturned. You were looking at some people who maybe didn't like being looked at.
When you start looking into money and you start kind of questioning things that normal people don't question, people kind of get upset about it. So I've had superintendents that I've talked to. I've had county auditors, the state auditor's office. They're just like, well, why are you looking into this? It's like, well, because I'm a tax-paying citizen here in the state of Iowa and I want to know. And so the more you start looking into things, it's like you've seen cases all over the state of Iowa and all over the United States where schools are embezzling money. And so once you start looking into something, the harder people kind of tend to push back on giving you simple answers to questions you're asking. It's kind of like, well, I want to look there a little bit harder now because there might be something that is hurting the people of Iowa that they don't know about. And so when you're kind of turning over those stones, as you say, it's good, but it's bad because part of it, you just don't want to ruin your reputation. I'm still young and I want to do what I can to help people out, but sometimes you have to kind of irritate those people in order to get the answers you want. So, for example, we're looking a lot into Dallas County, and I have that big book that I showed down there earlier, and all of that is Dallas County's, financial information over the last couple of years. And it's like, okay, well, it says that you guys are in the green, but why are you overspending so much money on different things? So, for example, in Dallas County, they had one of their places where I guess they appropriate money to was just office furniture. They allocated $6,000 for it, but they spent $198,000. And so it's like, you guys, on record and on the books, it says that you're in the green, you're not losing money every single year, but why are you overspending so much in these certain areas? Sure, you maybe say you have the money for it, but you don't need to be overspending that much. And then you start asking questions, and, I don't know if you know this, but do you know how much or what percentage of your county property taxes go towards schools?
I don't.
70% of your county property taxes go towards schools. 34% of your city taxes go towards schools. And then your schools also get money from the federal government, the state government, and then they also have their own levies. So the school board can decide how much they're going to charge each person to pay them. So a levy, for those that are unfamiliar with these terms, a levy is basically out of $1,000, how much you're going to pay. So like a school levy is like $13.50 for every $1,000 you'll pay that. And that's assessed based on how much your property is worth. So that's why farmers are really involved in this issue, because obviously they have a lot more property. And so your values and all of your assessed values, which they do every 2 years, that goes up. And when you're combating inflation and everything else, the amount of money you start to pay into the county, really gets up there. And that's why people are worried about this issue. And I know Governor Reynolds is singling out this issue, and she's looking towards trying to figure out the best way we can at least lower these rates and lower what people are paying. And then hopefully the eventual goal is to eliminate it.
Well, yeah, and I think what's really interesting and difficult about this problem is that a lot of the words you had said activate a lot of areas in people. So like even schools, they'll say that this is like, it's so important that you're funding schools. It's so important that you're putting money towards schools. So a high percentage of property tax means more money for school, which is good. And a lot of times people will say that school is a marker of your entire town or your community. But also people don't like to pay a ton of money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And especially like you said, for farmers, they have so much land when things are more expensive.
And the other thing that it comes down to as well is like we've been to high school, middle school, elementary school, all that stuff, right? When was the last time they had a very big distinctive change in these schools? Our education numbers in the state of Iowa are going down, but we're giving them more money every single year. Whenever Iowa has a surplus, that money goes back towards the schools, right? I mean, granted, we probably don't have that many surpluses because we're billions of dollars in debt.
Sure.
Actually, that's another part too. All 99 counties are in debt in the state of Iowa. And the state is in debt, $8 million. Adding all the counties, Iowa's within, $20 to $25 billion worth of debt right now. And I know people say that, you have to have some debt, but it's like, I understand some debt, but not this much.
Right. Is there any marker? I guess this is probably like the economic question that is yet to be answered. Have we decided what a good amount of debt is, or is that just like an idea?
I guess it depends on who you ask, and I'm not going to be the person to answer that because
Sure.
it varies, I guess, on what you're talking about. If it's a business, if it's a county, if it's a town, the state, whatever it is. But I can tell you $25 billion worth of debt is not good.
Sure. Well, and so I guess where in your investigations do you feel like this money is going? Like, is it that we're being charged too much? Is it that this money is disappearing? Is it that schools are sucking too much of this money, or the state is requiring more money than it needs? Like, where's the missing numbers?
I guess when we look into TIF, tax increment financing, how it works is they allocate that money towards a business that's coming out of the county's pocket. The county then takes that money away from being spent on roads, bridges, or even schools, whatever it is. So TIF is really what we're singling out now. And, the problem that we've ran into, because I've been doing this with a couple other people that I work with, but the problem we're running into is getting the proper documents for what we need. It's like we call the auditors, we call the school boards, we call anybody, and it's like, well, do you have this? They're like, no, someone else has it. Then you call that person. It's like, no, we don't have it. Someone else does. So having all this run around really kind of puts a drain on you. It's, the feeling where you're trying so hard, but you can't get anywhere. You're running on ice. It's not very fun, but the schools. So interesting fact for you. Everybody always blames Republicans for, defunding the schools, right? The last time in the state of Iowa that we cut funding for schools was back when Democrats had the trifecta in office. They had both the House, the Senate, and the governorship, and they cut spending towards schools by 10%. And so everybody always says, like, Republicans, they hate public schools. They don't want to do this or blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make a difference because the last time any funding was ever cut for schools, public schools in the state of Iowa, was during when the Democrats had the trifecta.
Do we know when that was?
Well, they had it in, I think, 2007 to like early 2010 times.
Okay.
So, but yeah, during that time period, they raised all the stuff, but then they had to cut it because they realized it's not financially, stable.
Well, and wasn't there like a huge housing crisis too?
Yeah, in 2008, that was unfortunate. There's a documentary on that. I can't remember what it's called, but
well, I imagine that might affect some of the, especially if 70% of the money that is paid in property taxes is going to schools, and now you have a housing crisis where the market is stalled. It might.
The school topic's always interesting because you do want to care for the future generation's education, but we've been doing the same type of process, the same classroom learning for how many decades, century, whatever it is, but nothing's changed. So my mom's actually a middle school, high school guidance counselor, and she's sent me some proposal ideas and kind of how other places are doing it that's working. And I think if we really want to kind of narrow down the school issue, we can't just keep it the same way that we're doing it. That's why I like the idea of getting rid of the Department of Education, because they just have so much money. They don't do anything with it, but the education of the overall United States that our children are getting is declining.
I wonder what that means. Do you have any defenses for that? I guess what are we comparing it to when we say that our education is dwindling or getting bad?
I mean, you can kind of go on really. Just look up where does the United States compare on education on a world stage, and we're I think 40, not even 40th. We're way down. But one proposal that I've looked at is have like, once you get through 8th grade, get kind of all your gen eds, you could call it, get those done, but then they choose like certain subjects that they're actually interested in where they know they want to have a career field. If a student doesn't know what career field they want to have, then just keep it broad and keep it like regular high school. But a lot of students that I went to high school with, they're like, I know I want to be a welder. I know I want to be a teacher. I know I want to do this. So why can't we narrow stuff down and then makes it easier for when they get into college?
Yeah, well, and I think I guess I'm all for reform. One of the harder things too, though, is that the turnover rate for teachers is just like incredibly high, and I don't feel like they're getting the proper like respect that they feel as if they deserve, and they might not be getting paid as much. Like I know where I'm from, a tiny town in Iowa, just like 20 minutes from here. We just rehired our like 75% of our staff, and we're going to have to rehire again, like another 50%. I don't know what's going on specifically from my town. I think things are a little,
There's something going on.
Yeah, there's something going on, I think. But I do feel, and this is kind of biased, but I do feel like teachers have always had this kind of resentment towards how much they get paid, how much they're respected, or something like that.
Well, and Iowa does have some of the lower salaries for teachers, which I don't like, but it's hard to say that we should just upright pay them more without any major changes happening. And I like, my mom's a teacher. I have great friends that are teachers right now. And actually a teacher friend of mine just came and visited me at the Capitol a couple days ago, and that was really fun to see him. But I just wish that there was a different system in place before we started, tolling out big dollars.
Sure. Well, and I might be incorrect, but the Department of Education doesn't actually pay the teachers, right?
No,
Isn't
no.
it a different department?
So the states actually pay the teachers, and the counties and the whatever else, they pay the teachers. The Department of Education sets like the curriculum for what's happening and everything. So like they will say, well, we need to be teaching on this type of stuff. But like I said, we've been doing that for how long, and our education has been declining.
Sure. Well, I also think that I don't know if you can necessarily blame. For me, I think that the government is just slightly overfunded as it is. So like you're not going to see me complaining about like getting fresh eyes on this stuff, like cutting funding. I do think it might be throwing the baby out of the bathwater. I do know that, or I believe that the Department of Education does fund like Pell Grant recipients, and it does fund like collegiate scholarships, which I think are good things. Yeah. And I wouldn't like to see that. Now, I don't think that defunding the Department of Education gets rid of that money. I think it just allocates it to different departments. If that's true, that's good. One lesson I've
learned so far is anytime government touches anything, it kind of goes bad. So I mean, you look at anything. I mean, once the government puts its hand on it, it's like, oh crap, here we go.
Sure. Well, and that might be true, but I do thoroughly appreciate the amount of government funding that is paying towards my college experience right now. You know what I mean? So,
well, did you know that your property tax dollars here in the state of Iowa go towards the coaches at the major public universities?
The coaches for sports?
Yeah. So like Matt Campbell is getting paid, and Kirk Ferentz is getting paid on our tax dollars.
Interesting.
So I kind of have like once I found that, I have a little bit more skin in the game where it's like, we can't be losing games if I'm going to be paying for it.
Let's say, where are my tax dollars going? That's very interesting, and that gets really interesting with the NIL funding and stuff, which I'm going to have a conversation with Jamie Pollard in a couple weeks about NIL.
That'll be fun having him on
the show. So, and I know he's very aggressive about that.
My dad's a big Jamie Pollard fan. So.
Oh, sure. That should be pretty exciting. But I want to get back into a little bit about this TIF action. So I know that TIF. Or I believe that TIF was originally created for somewhat of a noble purpose to make these expansions a little bit easier.
It was to draw business in. It was to draw companies and organizations in. But you look at windmills. Windmills is a good example. So the windmill people, they buy a plot of ground, and now before they start building, that's their assessed value right there. And that's what it's going to be for the foreseeable future is what that is. And then the county people, they're like, okay, we will help you finance this if we are going to generate revenue towards back to the county in however many years their contract is. And sometimes it's 10, 15. I think the max is 20. But they're going to be like, okay, so the county and the people paying the property taxes are going to finance this and pay that. And then once you get past this contract, you have to give it all back, but there's zero interest on it. And so the problem with the windmills, and this is a good example, is because the windmills don't have that long of a lifespan. If you think about it, 15, 20 years, and then they just kind of sit there. And what really irritates me about the windmills, and I just learned this a couple weeks ago, is the windmills are being turned off at night in a lot of different areas because they have nowhere for that energy to go. And so we're just paying for something and we're not seeing returns on it as a county, and yet they're turning them off. Like, why can't we do something with that?
Are we not seeing returns? Do you mean returns based on just the contract, or do you mean returns like we're not seeing beneficial energy?
A lot of the power lines in the northern counties here in the state of Iowa, they don't even actually go that much towards the counties. They get put on a high line that gets sent down to Chicago. But the returns that I'm talking about is like the property tax returns that the people in the county are paying. I mean, why are we paying for this but not seeing anything come back towards the county for so long? And when the windmills expire, maybe we broke even, maybe, but they don't put these, what they don't tell you is they don't put these on the actual documents that people, I guess, are allowed to see. Like if you were to go to Pottawatomie County and search up their financial audit statement, TIF is not on there, but yet they're losing money, a lot of money on TIF. And so it's like, why aren't you putting this on there? Why are they also, you go to any of these county pages, why are you making it so difficult to find a lot of this information? And so what I've been telling people that call me and I'll meet them at the Capitol or something, they're like, well, what can we do? It's like, well, show up to all those meetings, like school board meetings, show up there. Any, town meetings, show up there. County meetings, show up there. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Just show up and ask questions, because eventually the more people that ask questions, the more you'll actually be able to make the change happen. And so I've gone to a fair amount of, central committee meetings or just, a city meeting, a school board meeting. And every time I kind of just like to ask, like, hey, do you have this? And it's always a runaround. They're like, they give me a card or they say, here's this. And it's like, this isn't even relatively close. Where's the actual stuff I'm looking for? Mm-hmm. And it's just that runaround. And that's why, turning over stones, that's where it comes from, is just asking these very basic, simple questions. And that's what worries me. Because if you don't know where your tax dollars, that your hard-earned money, you don't know where that's going in your own state, that's where it becomes a problem. And so I have a lot of people that will call and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? And say, absolutely. And so I start making these phone calls and I talk to the auditor. They're like, well, you have to talk to this person. Then I talk to this person. They're like, well, no, you got to go over here and they should have it. And then after like 5 or 6 people, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. It's just been the runaround.
Right. So then I guess, what is your current problem with TIF? Like if you were to create a solution for how we should be handling these cases, is it more transparency? Is it different regulations?
Well, more transparency is always good. But What you would do is just say, you know what, the county is not going to pay, or we'll pay a certain percentage, but we're not paying the full thing. And we need to have like a firm timeline of when are we going to start seeing returns? How much are we going to start seeing? And how you can explain this to the people of the county, because right now you're getting people that are like, why the hell am I even paying property taxes? It's like, it's stupid. I'm not seeing any of the money. Nothing's changing, and it just keeps going up. They keep asking for more money. And so my thing with a bunch of different organizations is there's a handful of them in the state, but they will come and they'll be like, well, we need funding for this. And it's like, okay, how much? And then you say a dollar amount, and it's like, no, we need more actually. And you go to these organizations and, the school boards and everybody else. And that's my problem I found with them is you can give them infinite amounts of money, but they're still going to ask for more. Mm-hmm. It's like, where do you draw the line? And so with TIF, you need to have the government at least regulate it and say, okay, you're not going to be using the county's money, the people of the county's money. You're not going to spend this much of a percentage. Like you're going to be limited to what you can do. And we need to make sure that it's actually projects that the people are going to get a return on. Windmills are not a viable thing. There's tons of other options, like having an actual factory, and that's going to employ 500 people or something. Having that would be a very good use of TIF, because not just the county will see returns eventually, but the people working there will get what they need. And so I think having a little bit more government oversight, which is surprising for me to say because I don't like that, but at least for this, it was intended with, when it was created, it was intended with a good purpose, but now it's just being abused.
Sure. I think I need a little bit more clarification on the windmill situation, because to me, I think that there's more than just a financial return. I guess you could track it pretty well with how much money you're saving on energy or other things, but I feel like there's also maybe a global return. Like even if we're kind of jetting our energy over to Chicago or something, that is still kind of a net positive. Unless there was an effectiveness argument that you had that it doesn't work very well.
First of all, I'm not a big fan of the windmills, I would say. Sure. I don't like the way they look, and they're leaking. They actually kill thousands of birds here in the state of Iowa every single year, and we're not even getting all the energy. They're turning them off at night, so they're not making any money for themselves or for the people in the counties or anything where they're supposed to be paying back with zero interest, which is crazy too. But if the state of Iowa was really trying to narrow down energy, they would go nuclear. Nuclear is probably the most viable option you'll find. You just have a couple of those small little nuclear cubes, and they would power cities, and it'd be pennies on the dollar.
Sure.
But that's getting into sketchy territory, because then you have to piss off other people. And,
well, yeah. Well, and it's a little bit scary too. And I think one of the things is that, like, to me, and you might have been referencing this when you were talking about the episode that came up before this and the things that you disagree. To me, I don't know how much of a negative it is to at least be attempting to help the environment. Something like that, even if it costs money, I begin to question where like the attitude that we should do nothing comes from. I think that doing anything to help the environment is probably pretty good. There's obviously extremes. We do not need to be signing deals that surrender billions of dollars to, you know what I mean? Like whatever it needs to be, right? But there is a middle ground. And I think windmills do a relatively, at least I don't think they're hurting that much. We might be able to use them more effectively or to do them better, but I don't know if the windmill hate is like enough to say that we need to get rid of them totally.
From the farm that I grew up on in Algona, they put some up, and they look so ugly.
That is, I don't know.
They're super inefficient. I mean, and why put them in the most fertile ground in the nation?
You know, all of Iowa is fertile ground. I think it's because it's so flat. I do think that windmills have what's the opposite of like a diminishing return, like exponential. You know what I mean? Like two windmills are super ugly, but put like 80 of them in a field, and this is now like an attraction. You know what I mean? It's like,
you know, maybe to some, maybe to some.
Yeah.
You ask my dad, and my dad's like, "Nuh-uh, hate those damn things."
I also feel like it's the birds thing. Maybe I'm not an ecologist. Maybe I don't understand it, but I hear that and I'm just instantly like, is that a big deal? You know what I mean?
I mean, you're losing thousands of birds. I mean, you talk about environmentalists. I mean, that's a pretty big thing. Is losing your animals.
Yeah, it's definitely a good bumper sticker. I wonder if people are like really shook by that concept.
You know, some people are, and some other people just kind of brush it off. But I think losing any type of wildlife and circumstances that don't have to happen. Like, why don't you put these things in the desert or put them in the middle of the ocean or something? Why are you putting them here?
Yeah, sure.
But the returns for TIF, there's just not that great of one. And I imagine the counties just spend so much money every single year. Imagine you have 20 windmills that the county is financing, and you're paying now tens and tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're not seeing a return for 20 years. And then after you maybe get a little bit of return, the windmills now have to be torn down, blown up, you know, thrown in the dirt, because they actually can't get rid of windmills. You know that.
Yeah. Well, I do think though that with the return, the problem of not seeing it in a timely manner, I do think it is important to be sometimes making contributions for the future versions of you or for the future generations. Like right now, I feel like we are enjoying the spoils of decisions made 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Well, going back to what you had on with Professor Wolf, I was listening to that, and he's like, well, you got to think about your kids and your grandkids eventually. And I heard that, and I understand that, but I think there's so many other viable options that we have instead of this one. Like, if they really want to do, like, and make the green way work, there's other options like nuclear.
Yes, and
methanol is even a green type of fuel.
Yes, and I definitely support. Well, from what I know, I'm pretty supportive of nuclear. I haven't heard a super good argument against it, other than that it's scary or something.
Yeah,
along those lines.
Well, that's what people. I mean, in reality, though, it's really not that.
Well, and I imagine that that's the case. But what I guess I don't necessarily understand, if you're making an effectiveness argument, something along the lines of like, it would be a more effective use of our money if we did nuclear. That I understand, but it feels
the USS Theodore Roosevelt has been running off of a nuclear generator for 20 years now.
Well, and see, that's what I'm saying. It's like that I support, but sometimes the argument feels like just don't do green. Don't do wind. And it's not like it would be better if we did this. It's like stop doing wind.
I'm fine with green. I mean, solar panels, I mean, if you want to put them on your house and save your energy bill, that's good. Or you want to have something way out in the middle of the desert that no one's ever going to see, go right ahead and, you know, be my guest. But I think the windmills, especially like the county perspective with TIF, is not good. And then also, why are we turning them off then? If we're going to be the most efficient we can, why are we turning them off? I'm not against like green energy, like going into the pipeline conversation that I think we might have wanted to had. So they want to take, here's a little, I'll break it down for you guys.
Yeah, let's move on there.
Okay, so I'll break it down. So they have this idea, Summit Carbon Solutions wants to put a pipeline connecting, you know, I think like a dozen or so ethanol plants, and they want to capture the CO2 that's coming out of the smokestacks at these ethanol facilities, and they want to put in a pipeline, ship it all the way through Iowa, through South Dakota, into North Dakota, and just pump it thousands of feet below Earth's surface. The problem that I'm seeing with this is there's two major things. Is a lot of the landowners don't want this. I'm at the Capitol every single day, and every single day there's dozens of these people, and they always wear red shirts. You can always find them in a crowd. but it says stop eminent domain abuse. And that's what it is. A private company is wanting to get access to this eminent domain to go take a pipeline through people's farm ground for something that won't even benefit them. They want to pay these farmers one payment of $45,000. That's not near enough to rip up the farm ground, and not to mention the implications it would have if there was even a pinhole burst in this pipeline. Like, everything within a 2-mile radius is exposed to, carbon, and that amount of pressure and the way that they're doing it is not safe for people. It's going to cost Iowa a lot of money, and there's really not that big of a return. Besides, I guess you could say some of the people in the higher ups, I guess, might be able to get that. Some of the people that are running Summit, but there is an alternative, which is the good news. So the alternative is they can take this carbon from these ethanol plants, and they can. There's a chemical mixture. It's basically mixing that with hydrogen, and it creates green methanol, which Iowa and the company could then sell. And I've been having conversations with people, and a lot of people like the idea, but it's hard to get past that pipeline. So the state of Iowa, if they went with the methanol route and they were producing, even at 10 different plants, producing green methanol, which it would be, the railroad company and the barge company out on the eastern side of the state, those companies would make an extra $3.5 billion a year with just 10 ethanol plants producing green methanol. Green methanol is a huge industry, and it would employ hundreds of people here in the state of Iowa, and it's really, really cost effective. Like, it's very cheap to do this, and we don't use near amount of water that that the carbon pipeline people would need. So the problem is kind of jumping through those loops, and you have to overturn some of those stones and have those difficult conversations with people, which is always uncomfortable.
Yeah. So do you imagine that the people you would be fighting against the most are people who have like a financial vested interest in the pipeline?
Absolutely.
Is that really the only argument, or could you steelman like an average Joe's argument for the pipeline as opposed to?
So one of the average Joe arguments is like, well, we need to stop releasing this much carbon into the air. And that's like the stance that, climate activists will take. It's like, this is a good idea. I don't care about the pipeline. We just need to stop releasing this much carbon into the air. And I'm sure you've heard those arguments or maybe have some of the same. But the problem is there's a different way we can manage that carbon where Iowa can actually benefit a lot of money off of it.
Sure. Well, then I guess you're trying to make a decision based on like what Iowans can make the best out of versus like what the world could make the best out of.
But the problem is if they still capture that carbon and turn it into green methanol, then what's the difference? Why do we have to lose? Carbon is a very useful product, and we need carbon in everything we do. I mean, plants need it, we need it, but we do need, maybe if you want to make the argument saying we can't be releasing as much as we are, then the United States isn't even the problem. And the ethanol plants, their whole argument's destroyed because ethanol plants make up less than half a percent of carbon being released into the air by the United States every single year.
Yeah. Aren't the other percents like volcanoes and like cows, or is it other countries?
Well, a lot of it's other countries. Like third world countries are very, dirty and grimy, and they don't care about these climate regulations that the EU is putting on that we're spending billions of dollars on every single year.
Sure.
And so that's why when Donald Trump left the Paris Climate Accord, again, I think that was a very beneficial move because we can do whatever we want. We can spend all this money, but we're not going to stop the people causing the most damage.
Sure. I do think, though, that with the power of innovation and the power of things that we can do, it's like if this version of packaging up this carbon and making like green carbon, if this idea...
Yeah, making green methanol.
Yeah, if that works, then we should be pursuing that, and somebody has to do it for the first time. Mm-hmm. And that would be the same as this like tube, you know what I mean?
There is
like
a lot of
pipeline.
hope. There is a lot of hope. There's currently the first facility being built in Laverne, Minnesota, not too far away from the state of Iowa, but there's a facility being built there, and it will be fully operational by the end of this year. And so they're having a ribbon cutting sometime this summer, but that's going to be the first one. And what I've heard from the people that I've talked to is there's a long list of ethanol companies that want to go second. Everybody wants to see it in action, and then everybody else will follow along, which is good. But you still got to jump through the loopholes of the pipeline and what the implications are. My thing is it doesn't benefit Iowa when you're losing a very viable product. Like carbon is super useful. They have these same style of plants making green methanol using hydrogen, and all of these little things that no one thinks about can actually be huge money makers for the people of the state of Iowa. If they had this, your property taxes could hypothetically go down. With 10 of these plants, each methanol plant would profit just about $270 million annually. And so add 10 plants in, the state of Iowa is making millions of dollars off the property taxes of these facilities. And then they're adding jobs. They're creating new economic opportunities for people like the railroads and the barges and other companies. And I think it'd be a waste if we didn't do it. But the problem is turning over those stones and having these difficult conversations with people that have a lot more money than both me and you.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess just to reiterate, are you saying that this green methanol would effectively reduce the same amount of carbon as this pipeline, or like it still be somewhat comparable?
It would take it. It would completely take it. And so everybody has a question with where are they going to get the energy from to run these green methanol plants? That's where the windmills come in. We can operate.
If they were on at night.
Yeah, we will turn them on. We'll take it. We'll be like, hey, we'll take that energy. We'll need it. So then those people are making more money and they're not sitting there useless, And so there's a lot of different opportunities with it. The problem is just getting past that threshold. But for example, every BMW car that will be made here coming shortly will use about 1 ton of green methanol to make, which is, kind of impressive. And so they're making cars now that just run strictly off of green methanol. A lot of these EV cars that are being made with green methanol. The problem also is all these companies in the United States that need it, they're having to purchase that methanol from China. And so it's, if we're in a trade war, if we're in conflicts with them, you don't want to be relying on them. And so being able to produce that, Iowa could turn into the green methanol capital of the world overnight.
Now, I don't know maybe how much you'll know about this, but how, I guess, safe or tried and true is this process? Like, if I were to look into this, would I see like this is brand new and people are uncomfortable about it, or do you think this is pretty solid?
This is happening in other countries right now. It's just has yet to get to the United States. But the ethanol plant one, there's patents for it. The technology does work. It's in the process of being built right now, like the first plant that they have. But yeah, the technology is proven to work, and the patent is, I've seen it. It's just like the basic technology of science stuff that I don't understand at all. But as long as someone else can explain it to me in a deep manner, I'm like, okay, I got it.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good. But I just don't like the fact that we have a product like this and we're not using it. And especially when Iowans are struggling to make every, ends meet. I want to say, gosh, I'm trying to think of the number. There's, I think, around 1 million people in the state of Iowa that need like major assistance from the government. And that's terrible because we are one of the most, you could say, asset wealthy states in the nation. We have, the best ground. We have some of the hardest workers you'll ever find. And there's a lot of different avenues for opportunity, and we're just not taking them.
And so is a lot of that need, do you think that stems from property taxes, TIF, and some of these other issues, or do you think there are other things that are affecting?
Well, you can, look at inflation. Inflation's always been a problem, and the problem with that is inflation's going to happen no matter what you do. Something's going to happen, a natural disaster. Something's going to cause, prices to go up, but our wages have not been going up at the rate that inflation is consistently going up. And so over time, you keep adding on more payments, and then you can go to the medical side, which I'm not all too familiar with, but I know just a little bit. But all of your prices for everything, daily things you need, just keep going up, but you're not making any more money to compete with it.
Is that true on the wages thing? Because I know that people often reference minimum wage, but I can't remember the last time I had seen a place that actually pays minimum wage other than maybe restaurants, and they try to caveat that with like tips will balance out, something like that.
Well, I
don't know if this is just
my hometown movie theater paid my some of my classmates that work there like $4, $5 an hour, which is crazy. And they said like, well, you can collect tips, but I never saw anybody collect a tip. And it's like I didn't even know there was an option to give a tip at a movie theater. I had no idea.
Collecting tips is so crazy.
But it's
collecting tips at like Walmart or something.
Yeah, it's like we'll pay you pennies and dimes, and then you can collect those big dollar tips of the spenders at the movie theater.
That is really weird. But I guess like the thing is that I'm looking at this like minimum wage thing, and it's like it feels like the only people that are actually paying their employees minimum wage are like tiny mom and pop shops who theoretically can't afford to pay their people more. And then you'll look at like Walmart. Every restaurant is at least paying $12.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is pretty average.
Or like a lot of times higher, like Walmart right now is higher.
Well, I think
like
the thing is too, is like, even though they're only required to pay the minimum wage, they know that no one's going to work there for minimum. I don't care where it's at or what situation you're in. Not a lot of people are going to try and find jobs that are just minimum wage.
Well, yeah, and that's the idea. It's like, so not only, this is in a perfect description of what's happening, I guess, because I don't know if this is really what's happening, but it's like the only people that are offering minimum wage or mom and pop places, they can't afford to not offer minimum wage, and nobody would accept a minimum wage job from these people.
Yeah.
So it's like no matter what, they're getting kind of screwed. So I feel like the conversation about raising minimum wage doesn't make any sense to me because it's like they're already in the hole. You know what I mean? Like they already can't compete.
And for a lot of those local businesses too, it's like you add on, what are they going to pay on property taxes now? What are they going to pay on the insurance they need? And those prices just keep going up, and that's why those shops keep going under. You go down to like any major small town or any small town here in the state of Iowa, you'll see a handful of empty buildings and little empty stores that used to be that neat. Like you've seen those movies back in like the 80s, how all the small towns were popping, and that was the place to be. Like you didn't want to go to the city. We have this cool small town. We have like one dive bar. Everybody knows each other. But nowadays it's just not really feasible to have that.
Or like a super high turnover or something like that too.
And it's unfortunate because that was what small town America and everyday life for people used to be like, but now that's not an option.
Well, yeah, I guess, but I wonder when you're looking at like inflation versus like a minimum wage, I don't even know if like what people are making.
Maybe not minimum wage is the right way to put it. Just I guess
amount people are getting paid.
Average salaries, I guess you could say.
Sure.
The salaries are not going up with the rate of inflation. You look at like what we were back in 2000, and you could go buy a house and actually be fine. But now your chances of buying a house in mine keep going down. The housing market's in shambles, and we're not making enough money to compete with what's going on. And a lot of that stuff we can't even control. We were just kids, and we were growing up. We had no say over anything, and then we just kind of got left and dumped on. I'm not trying to shout out anybody, but the generations before us definitely did not help our case.
Well, and that's true too. I do think that there's this kind of red pill notion that I find somewhat attractive, which is the idea that like you can increase the amount of money you're making by following like a few steps, which is like graduate high school, don't have kids before you're married, and then the one I would add, which I think a lot of people on the right would disagree with more, is go to college, is what I would probably say too.
I think I'm one of those people that disagree with that.
Yeah, and I understand the sentiment. I think that if you compare average wages, college-educated people make a lot more money than non-college-educated people, is the general idea.
It also comes back down to your personal finances too, because if you're not going to be able to afford it, why do I have to pay for someone's college? That's why I hate the argument of free college. Like, why do I have to pay for you to go get a degree in whatever it is? Like, that's not my responsibility. If you want to go to college, fine, but I hate that argument where people say you have to follow that traditional route, because that's not at all the case.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing too. I do think college is a super scam if you don't know what you're going there for. Like if you're just going there to go, that is a waste of money.
And another good example is I have a really good friend from Iowa, and she is currently looking for a job. She's like a 4.0 student. She's had incredible internships and opportunities throughout college, really smart, really well liked by everybody. But she's like, I just can't find a job anywhere. I've applied to 20, 30 jobs, and it's hard to even get a call back. I've went into people's offices, and I can't get, anybody or any takers to hire me. It's like, what have I done wrong? I've followed the steps, and I've played these games. And there's a girl that I work with too, and she said the same thing. It's like, I'm trying to find a job or trying to find something to sustain, my lifestyle, and I can't find anything. And so I think what's unfortunate is college degrees have turned into high school diplomas, where people are like, well, if you don't have a college degree, you're screwed. But the problem is you have to pay for it. You didn't have to pay for high school. Parents had to pay for it through property taxes. But
sure.
But it's like everybody's seeing that, you need that college degree. Your college degree is just the same as a high school diploma now. But there's a lot of successful dropouts from high school that I know. Not a lot of them, but there's a decent amount, I'd say, where they're just like, I don't need this. And they go start working in a car shop. They go do something. And now they have a family and they're doing fine. And, that's kind of the way that college dropouts were back in the day. Like, I can't remember what the number is, but out of the top 20 richest people in the world, I want to say at least 5 or 6 of them were college dropouts. And I'm not saying obviously drop out of college, but I'm saying that not everybody needs it.
Yeah, well, and that's the big thing too. I will say that there's an interesting quality of life argument that I think is important to look to. So if you're saying that like people are doing well, but they're working at a car shop or they're making a good amount of money, a lot of the people that I know that are working at car shops are working like 60-hour weeks. You know what I mean? Or like working well, and they're making good money because they're working like a ton more than other people. And then there's also an aspect of like how enjoyable is that job for you versus a job that you maybe could have
And everybody's a little bit different.
Well, and that's the thing too. That's where I say like if what you want to do requires or would be highly beneficial to have a college degree, I highly support going to college. I wouldn't say like as an 18-year-old you shouldn't want to do a certain job because it requires that you go to college. You know what I mean? Like, go to college if you want to do what you want to do.
Well, the best career fields to get into right now that is like predictions for the future is any trade job. You know, look at welding or a lineman or, you know, a diesel mechanic. Those are the jobs that are going to be paying good. Electricians especially too, because if you look at the numbers for every 100 people leaving that type of work field, there's only about 5 people in our generation that are joining it. And so you're going to see a major shortage, and that's where people are really going to start making some money is when all those old people are retiring, and then it's our generation to go in there, but there's only a handful of them in each town. That's where you're really going to start seeing money, but it's also a lot of manual labor, which sadly our generation has shied away from.
Right. Well, and like I said, that kind of goes into the quality of life thing too, to where it's like, if I were to be able to choose between two things, you know what I mean? I would struggle to, but this is just maybe how I'm coded or just who I am, right? But I would struggle to choose the harder manual labor, harder, not like, I feel like there's other types of difficulty, in certain jobs. But I also think that it looks really attractive from an employer's standpoint to see that you had committed time and finances to a college degree that I think is rather important to people too.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I think it's just, but for business, a business degree, it's just a piece of paper. A sales degree is just communication, just a piece of paper. Like if you're going to be like a doctor, like my sister, she's in the nuclear medicine program in Iowa right now. Like, please go to college for that. I don't want you messing up on something like this. But and then my other sister's a nurse, and it's good that you need those degrees for certain fields. But I think a lot of those broad degrees you don't need anything for. And I think that's where employers are going wrong, is you're missing out on a lot of qualified candidates just because they don't have a piece of paper.
Yeah, well, I also think that there's a little bit of a trap to where like it's hard to gauge your actual ability accurately. And sometimes it really helps to have an outside body to gauge those things. Like I just know a lot of people who are like, I don't need a business degree to do this. I just watch the Crypto Bro on YouTube, and you know what I mean? And then you watch them, and then they've been working at Casey's for the last 5 years. Like I tell you, once this stock hits, though, I'm going to be a millionaire. And then they end up having kids with somebody at like 16, or whatever.
For the example of like a business degree, though, it's like just go apply at like 10 different businesses, like local businesses, big businesses, a corporation. Once one hits, stay there for a couple years, and then your resume is built. You're found the same thing as college where you're reliable. You showed up every single day and you did a job. And I think that's almost more valuable than a college degree is, where they show that you actually put in the work and you're taking a different route than what most other people have. And to be honest with you, anybody that's in college right now is probably not learning a whole hell of a lot. ChatGPT is super easy to use, and I've never used it for anybody that's watching, but no. So, I mean, if you're in any online classes, no one's really taking in that information. Besides me and you, obviously, but no one else.
Right, nobody else.
Nobody else besides us is doing a thorough job looking through stuff. But COVID really made everything kind of weird.
Yeah, I think it instilled a lot of. I don't want to blame COVID for why I'm lazy, but I do think that like it didn't help. It kind of fed into an addiction a little bit.
I mean,
too.
playing video games for a year straight, all night long, doing nothing. It probably didn't.
No, it probably didn't instill like a super good work ethic.
Oh gosh, we'd go to work, and me and my friends all had the same job, construction, and we go to work, and then we get done with work and just play video games all night.
Yeah. It
was prime Fortnite, so you really can't blame anybody.
Oh yeah, honestly, that was like a perfect storm.
It really was.
It really
was.
That's why I don't blame anybody for
COVID was weird. COVID was really weird.
Well, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the disparity between small businesses and big businesses, especially in pay. COVID totally boned that. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about extrapolating that difference, put everybody in home and then let Walmart stay open and whatever like that.
I have a friend who owns a restaurant out in California, and he lost his business during the COVID time. I mean, California was terrible. New York was terrible. Thankfully, we lived in Iowa where, you could still go outside and breathe the fresh air. But in some of those other places, they were really strict on it. The only thing that I really did not like about COVID, besides wearing the masks, it was, not lawful for schools to actually make us wear masks. Did you know that? There is actually a federal thing where it says masks are only experimental and have not been proven to be, working yet. And so there was a father, I was watching a podcast that he did, and he was talking about it, where he emailed his school, and he's like, well, I'm not having my kids wear a mask. They're like, well, you have to. And he's like, no, here's where it says that these are experimental and people have to sign off on them if they're going to wear a mask in a school. And so that school district, I can't remember where it was, but they had to get the signatures if you didn't want to wear them. And then if you did wear them, you also had to sign.
Interesting. I would love to see maybe like a test study to see how many of those kids got sick versus the ones that, wore masks or whatever, right?
Well, there's just still so much unknown about what happened during that time.
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit looser on just like the shortcomings of people than maybe other people. I think there is a tendency to create this grand conspiracy that it was all this like intentional ploy to do these things. I feel like you should be a little skeptical of that, and the more likely option would be that people were trying their best and they were stupid and made mistakes or something like that. You know what I mean? As opposed to...
At least for right now, from everything that I've seen, though, it was released from the Wuhan lab, and then it spread all over. And I'm not sure, don't quote me on all these reports, but I've been seeing that ventilators were not the proper move to put people that were sick on. That ventilators were intentionally killing people. But
intentionally.
And the problem with the whole thing is the hospitals were making thousands of dollars for every time they had a positive COVID patients. So, like, if you went in there and you said you had the flu, they'd give you a test and the test would say negative, but they're going to put that in the system as a positive because they'd get extra money from the federal government.
Yeah, I'd have to look into these things. Even stuff like that, I'm a little bit skeptical of. I feel like every time I hear some sort of accusation about that, like I or somebody I trust looks into it and they're like, oh, no, this incentive is like somewhat like that, but it's different for these things. You know what I mean? There's some sort of missed
And that's good though, because you're actually doing your own looking into it, not relying on someone else to do it. But that's the problem with like local governments right now is not a handful of people are watching over what they do. No one's trying to hold them accountable, and there's no transparency involved. And that's why we're in this property tax problem, is because it's like for however many years we were just kind of like, oh, I was, not terrible, we're not great, but I'm not going to mess with it. But now once it hits the fan, it's like, holy crap, I should have been paying more attention.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think your views on transparency are so important. I had heard this really interesting thing. They called it the magic box theory, where they had said that like things have become so complicated that we're starting to fill in the blanks of like things with these crazy conspiracies. They would use the example of like a compass pointing north. When you would look at that, it was very obvious that this was telling you the truth, and it was very easy to see why this is north and you could trust that it's north. Now when you use your phone that's supposed to tell you where north is, you have to trust, is the government telling me that this is north? Is this thing functional? Well, how is it even telling? And so like this lack of transparency on where this money is going allows people to fill in so many blanks.
And that's why Doge is super crazy. I mean, what Elon Musk is doing, love or hate the guy, he's at least trying to cut back funding on the federal level. And you can go back to every major politician's statements when, like Nancy Pelosi, for example, she hates Elon Musk, but back in 2008, she said, oh, we need to see where all this money's going. We need to stop it. Bernie Sanders, all these people have been saying the same thing, but then once Elon Musk does it, it's like, holy shit, we need to burn down all of his Teslas.
Yeah, I do think that I don't know how many people actually disagree with the idea of Doge. I think they would be skeptical that it might be effective, but I don't think they would say it's bad. I don't think they'd say it's a bad thing. They might just say like, oh, they're not going to find anything, or like they're going to do a bad job. That might be fine, you know what I mean? But they're not saying that it's bad or evil. I do think that the arguments are instead, though, that Elon Musk is unqualified, maybe internally motivated as like a bad person or something like that. Isn't he getting paid millions of dollars to do this job?
No,
right?
He's doing it all for free.
Okay, I had read or heard something along those lines.
Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing their job all for free. Actually, Donald Trump has to take at least $1 a year, but every other dollar that he's making is being donated. I'd
have to look into that statement to qualify. Would it bother you if he was making millions of dollars for this job? To me, it seems kind of ironic.
Yeah, it would definitely be like a little skeptical, like why are you collecting money? But he's also the richest man in the world who probably doesn't need to be doing this right now, but he's doing it because he just wants wasteful spending to stop. And from looking at everything, like why are we paying, $20,000 or $20 million to have little kids in another country get their own Sesame Street? Why is that our obligation? And there's just examples like, why are we paying for transgender surgeries for someone in some other country way far away? Like, why are we doing that? And so then you look back and you see like some of those big political families making a lot of money off some of these things, and they're donating to their, nonprofit organization like millions of dollars. Like Chelsea Clinton was getting like $8 million a year or whatever to her nonprofit. It's like, what the hell even is her nonprofit? But it's just like, that's a good example of like a lack of transparency for where our money's actually going. And I think people are starting to wake up and realize it's like, I didn't know that any of this was happening, but now that their eyes are open, the people that were getting the money are pissed off because it's no longer going to be there. So,
do you think there's a possibility that after all of this investigation or that all of the work that they're doing, that like there's not a ton of fraud? Would you believe that if that came to be the truth?
If that's what they actually came out with, but I mean, even already, I think there's a bunch of fraud. Already, I think there's a bunch of fraud, and it's just clear by the people that are all getting upset. It's like, well, so the way that it was described to me from someone I know in D.C., he goes, well, they're sending our government money to an organization, and that organization is then paying out employees, maybe doing a little bit of work that their organization says they're going to do, but then they're donating to politicians. And so you're sending $10 million to X or whatever, like, X is a bad example because that's Elon Musk, but say you're sending $10 million to a water company, and they're supposed to deliver water to people that don't have clean water. Well, they're going to pay their employees a lot of money and their executives of that company a lot of money, and those people are going to then turn around and donate to all these politicians to get that money back the same next year. And so it's just this, repetitive cycle of where's this money going? Is it actually doing any good? And then Elon Musk goes in there with his Doge team, and what is it, Big Balls is how they title the one guy. You saw that? So they go in there and they're like, well, this is actually what's happening. And I think more people are enjoying it than they're hating it, but there's that select few that are now burning down Tesla dealerships and keying cars and everything else, which political violence is never the answer.
Yeah, I think I think you are right. Like I said, I've never been super skeptical of the idea that more transparency is going to be bad. Mm-hmm. I do think that the reason why I asked that question about like what if it came out that like there wasn't a lot of fraud, what I would say too is that like transparency can also be manipulated too. Mm-hmm. Like as in like something that looks like transparency can just be lies. It can just be not true. And that is kind of important to understand.
It's all about the narrative. It's all about the narrative.
And that's the idea. And that can get spun by Elon Musk. That can get spun by people. Mm-hmm. I think it is a little bit worrisome that you begin to wonder what the richest man on the planet wants exactly. Mm-hmm. And so like to be in such a powerful position, to be next to the president of the United States, to own one of the biggest social media platforms, these things are awesome. Like I said, they're like, he earned it or whatever needs to be said about that. But I think it should garner a little bit of skepticism about the same skepticism that you would apply to everything that happens on the left too. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like anytime they say like there's all of this fraud in the Department of Education, you should be working to be like, okay, that might be true. I can see that. What does the right have to gain for spreading this kind of information? Can you create a story? Mm-hmm. Can you create a conspiracy? Then you look into it to make sure that it's actually true that that's the case. That's what I would ask with people who are really big fans of Doge and Elon Musk. Yeah,
and I mean, obviously everything that happens is going to have its own little problems, and there's always internal stuff going on that we're never going to talk about. But the media is just so distrustful. And it's a little bit on both sides, but I think more for the left, at least in the 2020 election and the 2024 election. I think about 90-something% of the media's coverage was hate towards Donald Trump.
The left was distrustful in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of everybody. 2020 was a weird year.
I think everybody. This is kind of what I was talking.
Weird year, but 2024, most of the media coverage I think it was like 95% of the media coverage towards Kamala Harris was positive, and 95% of the media coverage towards Trump was negative.
Here's what I will say about media coverage, and this is a really important distinction too, is that alternative media garners more views than standard media. You know what I mean?
Like, well, that's why podcasting got so big. Well, that's why we're sitting here. It's taking over. Like you look at MSNBC and CNN, they're firing a bunch of longtime staffers. And it's just like they're not getting the same amount of heat. Because I would rather listen to Donald Trump on Joe Rogan. I'd rather listen to Kamala Harris on Call Me Daddy than I would have listened to people in the media tell me what they're doing, because I don't trust that. I'd rather hear it directly from someone's mouth, which podcasting gave us.
Well, and that's exactly the point. But I do think that when you say things like 95% of the media is for, Kamala Harris.
Mainstream media.
Yeah, if 95% of alternative media is for Donald Trump, there's more distrust for Kamala Harris than for Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Like, because there are more views,
I just like the, when Trump started going on those podcasts and everything, and then Kamala was on them too. But now it's like all over. Like, if I want to hear, Bernie Sanders talk about something or AOC talk about something, I can just search her name up on YouTube or his name up on YouTube, and I'm going to come up with 10 different podcasts to listen to where I can see directly what they're saying.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't trust all the things that they say, and I don't trust 100% of anything that anybody says, right? I'm always skeptical about stuff until I can prove it for myself.
Well, and that's what I think is important. So the reason why I kind of brought up the Elon Musk Doge thing and why I think it's important to bring up alternative media versus normal media to assess what is the truth and what isn't the truth is that, to me, you have events like January 6th happen when you trust just people generally who are trying to overturn things, who are trying to talk about.
What do you think of the pardons
for the insurrectionists?
Yeah, the January 6th people.
I would have to look at who exactly is pardoned and who isn't. I think that there are certain members, like the people who like literally broke windows and broke in, like those people deserve to be charged with those crimes, right?
I know a guy who was actually from Iowa, and he was out there, and he was being shown around, like there's videos and stuff, like he was being led in by police officers and shown around by police officers, and he was in prison, or I guess in jail for a while. And it's like people like that. It's like if you're being directed around by an officer on the federal level like they were at the Capitol, then it's like, why are you being thrown in prison? I didn't like that. But people that were violent and like punching people and hurting people, I 100% agree with that.
Right. I do think there's an interesting distinction too, in just how mobs work, and that like being led around or led into the building, I actually don't think that's kind of how you calm down a crowd. You know what I mean? Like if you only have 100 people versus 1,000 protesters or rioters, you know what I mean? And something has to be done. You're not just going to start mowing them down or like, you know what I mean? There's going to be a point where you just have to back up and guard the next entry point, which would have been.
Well, that's kind of what it's like at the Capitol when we had the gender identity bill here in the state of Iowa. I mean, you had, I think there was like 3,300 protesters at one point that were shuffled in and out of the Capitol in just one day. Yeah. But talking to the officers there, and they had to bring in other people and to help kind of keep the place not from going crazy. But yeah, you have those people there, and they organize them in a certain way to where we can still maintain our distance from them and not have those confrontations we don't want to.
Well, and that's what I said, because there are certain aspects, and I use the January 6th case because I feel like it's much easier to track now that it's been so long, and now that the court processes are a little bit closer to done. It's much easier to track like exactly where the lies were and exactly why that thing happened. So that's why I'm skeptical. Like, I like that more transparency is happening. I like that that's the way that we're moving. But I do think that people need to be really cautious about if they are like considering it the truth, because it goes against the norm, because it goes against something, even if it's not true. Because again, I'll point to some of the January 6th stuff that I think was just straight up not true and proven so, but motivated so much of that action. And so I think people are scared with Elon Musk.
We both have the same one. We just want more transparency, even in local government to state government to federal government. I just want more transparency.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, like, I do want more transparency, but I also think that with more information has to come more responsibility from us as people to interpret.
To look into your own stuff too. Yeah. You know, you can't just take what everybody says.
Yeah, because I don't necessarily think that more speech is good speech. I don't necessarily see, because that puts a lot of responsibility on us to interpret that speech. And then if it becomes really hard to disseminate what is the truth and what is a lie, events like January 6th happen. And I think that it is really important that we don't go too far in just believing everything that Doge discovers. You know what I mean? And obviously the opposite is true too. I would never be like, Doge is always lying because Elon Musk is no, he could absolutely, he's like super autistic. I'm sure he's like really good at finding this stuff out. You know what I mean?
So what's he have? I can't remember what it's called.
Asperger's?
I think so. Sure. I think so.
But whatever it is, he's dialed in. I can tell you that. So I'm not worried that he's incompetent necessarily. But I do think that there's incentive to lie. Whether they take advantage of that, that's up to the person, right? But I do think it's important that as viewers, we are like really locked in.
That's why when it comes like the property tax thing, I'm like very, determined to figure out what's going on, because I'm not going to take anybody else's word. I'm going to take what my own research has shown me and everything else. But yeah, no, that's That was an interesting time too, though. You kind of talked about it a little bit before, but the gender identity bill here in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, I'm interested. Because you had a lot of interactions with people there.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of misconceptions about the bill. You can still be transgender, and to be quite honest, once you're over the age of 18 and you want to do that, I really don't. Like, that's not my thing, but you kind of do what you want to do and leave me alone, and don't harm any children in the process, or don't try to manipulate children into doing that to themselves. And so I think when we had that signing of that bill that Governor Reynolds did, it went from the House, and then it passed in the Senate the same day, and then it was signed the next morning by Governor Reynolds. It was really kind of a neat thing to watch. And so that bill basically just stated the obvious, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that's the only two things you can be, and that's what you're born as. So is either a man or a woman. There's no other misconception of that.
Yeah, well, and I think that in a lot of the applications, I do think that we're focusing on kind of smaller details about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think an interesting thing is that, like, if we were to find that transing kids lowered suicidality by, like, a lot, would you be in favor of it?
The problem is it doesn't.
Yeah, so that's the problem. But if it did, would you be in favor of it?
I still don't think I would, because I still think God created you the way that you're supposed to be and not trying to be something else.
Well, the idea is that's defended by the left is that by not allowing kids to transition, you're effectively
And that's just a terrible
passing
argument
up.
to make.
Yeah, well, what I would say
My
is
mom's
that
a mental health professional, and in more cases than not, I mean, I've had conversations with her too, but it's like it's not going to do anything. They're still uncomfortable in their skin. Why not actually try to help them and, try to teach them, like, no, you're exactly the way that you're supposed to be. You don't need to be something else. It's not gonna change everything. You're still gonna have those same feelings. We just need to work through that in your head. And the problem with the left is they've been pushing, well, no, you need to change, and then you're going to be all set. Do you know the name Chloe Cole?
Mm-mm.
So she transitioned when she was younger, I think, 12, 13 years old, maybe around that age. And once she got to, I think it was 19, 20-ish, she realized that I'm not supposed to be a boy that I transitioned to. I'm still a girl. I still have that internal feeling. And so going off the mental health thing, it's like, even if it was shown, which it won't be, but hypothetically say it was shown that it's going to lessen suicide rates, it's like, well, when they get older and when they get to that stage and they kind of realize that when they grow out of that, that thought, it's not going to make a difference on how they're thinking. And so that's just a fabrication made by the left, is that it's lowering suicide rates, but it's not true.
Yeah, I think
and the fact that we're even having these conversations, like our parents didn't have these conversations. No one ever in the history of time had these conversations.
Right.
People are like, well, it happens in nature and it's happened for hundreds of years. And I'm like, well, there's always cases. But, talking to people at the Capitol too, it's like you weren't having these conversations 20 years ago. You wouldn't even think of it. You just knew a man as a man and a woman as a woman. So what changed? It's a mental health crisis in the United States right now.
Well, I guess the idea is that, like, one, what has always existed is depression and suicide.
Absolutely.
Maybe not depression in the way that it's been. And so I guess the idea is that there might be corollary links between these ways of feeling and suicide. And so the idea that I think the left was maybe even rightfully trying to propose was like, hey, maybe this is the issue. Let's see what can work. Now, when presented with data that would prove to you that it's not the case, you should be able to fall back. What I think the problem is that I don't even think transgenderism is people who are actually transgender is like less than 1% of the total population, but it's like 90% of the conversation. And I think so much of that is that, like, I don't think people are really willing to be trans or to support transgenderism, but they sure as hell are willing to defend it for some reason. And so you have these crazy things about, like, women in sports, women in bathrooms, that for some reason
that example
the left is defending.
That I gave you earlier is like, in the women's fencing competition right now, one of them in Great Britain, the two people that qualified for the championship were both biological men. In the women's fencing, it's unbelievable. It's like, how is this even a thing now? And so you look at Riley Gaines. I've met her, and you talk to her. It's like, well, she had to race against what's his name from Penn State?
Caitlin Clark, not Caitlin Clark.
You know who I'm talking about, though.
The swimmer?
The swimmer, yeah. Leah Thomas.
Leah Thomas, yep.
It's like you have to race against a biological male who was like 456th in the national rankings, and then he goes against the number one swimmer in girls, which was Riley Gaines, and he beats her. And actually, oddly enough, and this is kind of putting Leah Thomas down a little bit, because Riley Gaines did tie one time, and they gave that trophy where she tied with him. They gave that trophy to Leah Thomas.
Yeah, I do think that even in the total of sports, it's still only 1% of situation, but those are loud.
And
I
that
don't.
1%, that 1% is 1% too many.
Yeah, well, and that's the idea, is that it gets defended by 100% of people, like, or liberals. You know what
Why
I mean?
don't
And
they
that's the
make, if this
confusing
is a real
part.
big problem, is you want to play in sports, well, either play as what you were when you were born, which is either male or female. Play the sport that you were, that you're designated to. Don't go to the opposite one. You don't see women going into men's sports. You just see men going into women's sports. So if you are really that concerned about it, then make your own little small transgender league and kind of do whatever you want to do, and I'll leave you alone. But don't go into women's sports and take their titles, take their accomplishments. And for the party that says we are the most pro-women party in the world, this is very anti-woman.
Yeah, well, and I agree with all of that sentiment. I do think that it's such a over talked about portion of it. I think the mental health idea, or like this kind of moral standing on transgenderism, is much more applicable and interesting of a conversation to have, because it actually affects people. Like I said, the idea is that this is supposed to be helping with your mental health. It's supposed to be helping with suicidality. It's supposed to be helping with these things. And I think that it's really important for the right, if you're going to engage in these conversations, to say, why I agree with you. We should be prioritizing mental health. We should be preventing suicide. This isn't the way. And then to come up with those reasons as to why it isn't. You know what I mean? I think that that's a much more productive conversation than maybe getting stranglehold by like the crazy liberals on X that are supporting men and women's sports. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's really what's happening right now.
And, I think social media has a big play in that. Social media has a big thing that's involved in mental health stuff. There's a really interesting series. It's a 4-part series, it's 4 episodes. It's called Adolescence, and it's on Netflix. And I watched that over the weekend, and it's really interesting. It's about the UK and how social media has played a very big role into the increase of stabbings over there. But I think social media has really been a driving factor of how the mental health crisis in our generation has been.
Well, and that's kind of what one of the things is. I don't think we were meant to be interacting with so many people. You know what I mean? Like, even on TikTok, thousands of people a day, you are getting their messages. And it's like, normally when there was a small group of people who really enjoyed beating up homeless people, like, they got bullied kind of out of society to stop doing that, or at least to stop doing it publicly. But now you can go online and find a group of Redditors who love to beat up homeless people, and now you have friends. You know what I mean? And so those small
and they post
groups
about
of people,
it, and they're one-upping each other. It's,
you know what I mean?
terrible.
And so it's like that can kind of blow out of proportion to like these small groups of maybe people, transgenders, or maybe these people.
What's hard for new parents, I think, to decide too, is I've had these conversations with my siblings, and they all have children. I'm the only sibling that doesn't have a child yet, so I'm the fun uncle. But no, it's like, when will you give your kids a phone? I think that's a hard conversation for upcoming parents to think about. So
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Jeez, I don't know. I got my first iPhone when I was a freshman in high school, and I wish I
like 14,
didn't.
Right?
Yeah, I wish I didn't though. I really wish I didn't. I think it caused more problems than it did good. I mean, this is like a little power device. Back in the day, they had to go to the library, or they had to go to like the school automation center just to see what Google looked like. Yeah, but nowadays you have everything in your hands, and I think that's a dangerous thing to have.
How did you feel about the DEI rollbacks and stuff at a university level?
I liked them. I think DEI is just I don't know. It's caused more harm than it has good.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, there's applicants, and especially the Asian students nowadays, they're getting denied colleges because they are naturally more smarter, is what these colleges were saying. And so, or naturally more smart, sorry. But it's like they are getting denied at universities. And it's like, well, why? I have a 4.0. I'm a good student. I've never gotten in trouble. I have a really clean record, but I'm not able to go to a university. And then I think DEI, its intended goal might have been good, where they include more people, but what actually ended up happening is creating more diversion.
Yeah, I wonder, what about for schools like us that don't have DEI programs as far as admissions goes, or other things like that, but have DEI programming for like clubs, for like groups? Like, we had, different faculties that were hired to support different groups of people. How do you feel about rolling back DEI for those things?
Well, I don't think we need them in the first place. I don't think we ever did. I mean, look back when our parents were going to college. My dad went to Iowa State, and there wasn't a program for that, and there was no issues. Racism is more of a problem now than it was back 20 years ago. I mean, it's more of an easy conversation to have, and the media controls all the narratives and everything else. So it's definitely worse than what it used to be. And obviously, everything that did happen is terrible, and I don't wish that on anybody. But nowadays, it's just in the conversation 24/7. It's kind of like the transgender thing you're talking about. The more you talk about it, the more of an issue it becomes. The more people have to say words about it. But nowadays, especially since Barack Obama got into office, his 2008 campaign was good, but his 2012 campaign was all about race. And then black people are like, you know what? I do need this. I am worse than you, and it's, intrinsic. I do have different sets of abilities, but I need you guys to treat me differently. They were asking to be treated differently, which I don't agree with.
I don't know if they were saying they have different intrinsic sets of abilities. Is that what the argument was?
No, they were more like institutional racism, where I guess that's a better way to put it, where they're like, the institutions are out to get us, and maybe some of them were, and that's what we need to stop and need to focus on and make sure that everybody has the same abilities. But the more conversation you bring up about it, then you're taking opportunities away from other students as well. I think people need to be hired based on merit and based on how good they actually are, not on what race you are. I don't see race. I see, the skills that you have, the abilities that you have, and everything else. I don't see any of that other stuff. That other stuff is just useless. It's like embrace your culture and embrace what has happened and everything. But I don't want to see that about you. I want to see who you are as a person.
Yeah, well, and I agree a lot with that in terms of hiring and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I do think I've interviewed and I've met with a lot of the people who run some of these organizations, and especially people that have been hired to help with these DEI things here on campus. Mm-hmm. I think they're incredible people and they're helping students. You know what I mean? And so I guess to me, it's like a lot of them aren't even super founded on the idea of race or DEI. Like that's what their program is, but they are contractually obligated to talk to everybody.
And I think like going back to what you said too, is there's probably bad examples of everything. Mm-hmm. So not all DEI is terrible, or not all DEI is trying to do, something awful or making it seem worse. But there's examples across the country where DEI has really harmed other people as well, and it hasn't been useful. And so I just look back to like the olden, like even 20 years ago, there was none of that, and there was very few problems, I would say. But yeah. I think just why not change the name then? Why not just call it a help center or a group center where they can help people out? Why do you have to bring in diversity, equity, and inclusion and make it all about race? Why can't you just have an organization where you want to help people?
Yeah, well, I think I don't know. It's very interesting if somebody feels, I don't know, there are certain identities in me that I'm starting to discover that I just kind of don't understand. Like, I'm really big into Super Smash Bros. I love that game. You know what I mean? Yeah. I watch a lot of content. I play the game.
My brother just whooped me in that last week, and I hate losing to him.
Yeah. I'm at like a somewhat professional level at playing the game at this point. You know what I mean?
I won't play with you.
Yeah, no, don't.
I don't want to get beat that
bad. But when I play with people, I play with a bunch of novices, and they just play the game as a party, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
And I can't even engage in the game with them. You know what I mean? I'm just playing normally, and I'm having like a little bit of fun, or like laughing or whatever. But I can't talk about any of the technique. I can't talk about anything that's happening. What characters are the best? References that people would know. I can't talk about any of that stuff. Yeah. And then I host a Smash tournament, and 4 people who are professionals come, and we're laughing, we're joking about the game. We know different specific mechanics because I'm surrounded by people who share that Smash identity with me. Yeah. The idea is that probably exists with race as well, whether we want it to or not, whether it's a good thing or not. Some people, when surrounded by people who share a identity with them, they get to have that kind of joy, that experience. And that's what these programs are supposed to do, theoretically.
That's what they're supposed to do, but I think that's kind of been ran in a whole different aspect of it. Like it's made it all about, I'm trying to figure out a good way to word this, where they've made it too much about race, because I don't think that race really should be an issue anymore. We're in 2025. And you need to be hiring people and doing stuff based off merit. But for those groups, that's fine. But I don't think DEI is the right term for it. Get a club, get an organization, do something. But DEI is not the proper way to phrase it. Because it's almost saying that other people have less abilities because of their skin color. And I don't think that's true at all. We live in America, and you have tons of opportunities here. But why do you have to bring race into it, saying that just because of your race, you need extra help? That's not at all the case. I think everybody has their own little gifts that God gave them, and I think that DEI has just kind of turned it into something that is that it's not. And like you said, if that was the whole purpose of DEI, was to get people together where they can share the same values and everything else, that's fine. But I think DEI is the wrong thing to call it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the only distinction that's important with like maybe like race-based things and then like things like liking Super Smash Bros. Is that you can choose to like you can choose Super Smash Bros. You can't necessarily choose your race or something like that. And I agree with you that a lot of applications of DEI have been unfair. They've been kind of, even for the left, they would be putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't be funding by year 19, it's too late. You know what I mean? Like when they're starting college, if you really wanted to help, you're not in the right ballpark. You know what I mean? We need to be getting there sooner if we're going to be funding these things.
And I think anything that is, you know, a racist thing or something like that, we need to look at them and we need to change it. I don't think it's right, and I think it's, you know, terrible for the United States, terrible for the people that are involved in the situations. So I think if there is any signs of that, then, you know, a collective group of people can get together and make a change. But I think DEI as a whole has just been, you know, a shamble.
Yeah, well, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that sentiment too. There are certain examples. Like I said, I would definitely defend clubs and organizations. I love seeing people being successful, having groups of people.
And that's fine.
You know
that's
what I mean?
good.
Yeah, I support that. I do agree with hiring and other stuff like that, especially with applications. But we are running a little bit low on time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of wrap this episode up. If you want to summarize a lot of the stuff that you've said, any main points or themes you want to talk about, or if there's any advertising or plugging, or you want people to go and check something out.
No,
this is really your opportunity to kind of round us out.
Definitely thank you, though, for having me. It's been fun. So, but yeah, the property tax issue is definitely a big one here in the state of Iowa, and that should be a bipartisan issue where we want to lower cost and property taxes across the board. And I think we're in the right direction, especially having conversations like this definitely help. TIF, I don't like you, TIF. My bad. Actually, I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not a big fan of the TIF program. I think small town governmental transparency is a big thing. Definitely show up to meetings, to ask questions. You just want to know. And I think everybody in the state of Iowa is looking forward to hopefully alleviating the property tax pain that we're feeling right now. And then when it comes to everything else you talked about, I thought it was fun. So I guess until next time.
Yeah. Well, Evan, it was awesome having you on, and thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.